of the narratives he was doing this based upon are pushed by which side? He wrote on his gun, "Here's your reparations." Who is the group, who is the party that is anti-reparations because they say it's an attack on white people, even though it's not? Who pushes that narrative? I'm sure everybody has seen by now what happened on Saturday, where the white supremacists went into a black neighborhood and shot up the place. Now, I've been researching this over the weekend. I read most of the manifesto, all I could get my hands on, checking all the news coverage from the left and the right, seeing how this is going to be covered, because I think a lot of how it's going to be covered reveals even more of what's going on. Now, looking at all the information I have about this, it is very clear what happened. There is not much room for interpretation of his motives, why he was doing it. Was he mentally stable? Which, I don't know why people are calling him crazy, because he seemed to know exactly what he was doing, and seeing how everyone's going to twist this to their narrative. Of course, I already know the left, they're going to try to make this a gun thing. But the right I found particularly interesting, because right now, it amazes me how the right reacted immediately, and how they're scrambling and getting incredibly defensive, and it's not like an innocent defensive, because they're jumping to all these things. They're either deflecting, dismissing, minimizing. I see so many of them trying to cover this as a race-neutral incident. A lot of the people I watched who were covering this, I went through an entire, they'd do 30 minutes on it, and they would avoid saying the word white supremacy unless it was explicitly written in the article they were reading. Or they're deflecting to other incidents and changing the motive to try and warp it into something else. And I have saw so many insane takes. Worst being, I think Welsh had the worst taste, and I think I have to actually make a whole separate video on that, because it was so insanely bad, and there was so much to cover. He literally tried to make it about white victimhood. I am not kidding. But let's look at how some of this was covered. Now, there was an interesting part of his manifesto I caught, because one of the things that the right is trying to avoid is saying their rhetoric didn't cause this. They're deflecting, saying he admits he's that completely changes when it comes now to social views and views on other topics where he would be considered they don't extreme right. All views. There's a few views they have a very hard time pinning down, like neo-Nazism, which he is a self-admitted. He agrees that he's a neo-Nazi. He believes in the tenets of neo-Nazism. Governmentally, he does land authoritarian left. And that was one of the deflections many on the right were trying to use. Because a lot of what he mentions here are ideas that have been pushed on the right. And we'll get to that. We'll go over what was written on his gun, where a lot of the narratives he believes, where they came from, and all that. But let's start here. This is from his manifesto. This is something I found interesting, because obviously the right is trying to deflect away from their responsibility with their rhetoric, emboldening some of these people. That's different from saying you should be personally held responsible for what somebody else did, but your rhetoric can cause people to go in certain directions. But certain rhetoric being pushed can lead people to certain areas. Or here's an interesting one I found in the manifesto, in his Q&A thing that's early on in it. He goes, "Are you a white supremacist?" "Yes, I would call myself a white supremacist. After all, which race is responsible for the world we live in today? I believe the white race is superior in the brain to all other races." Now, hang on. I think I've heard stuff like this before somewhere. I believe it was phrased a little nicer, but I think I've heard this somewhere before.
Listen, I'm going to say this and I'm done. Some of y'all need to thank the white man. Because if it wasn't for the white man, you'd be somewhere else that you wouldn't be happy. United States was founded by white men. Kudos to them. The United States was built in part by black men, slave labor, and Chinese men, and Jews, and immigrants who came over here and made this a better place. All of us together did that. We all are responsible. But if you want to go back to the initial risk of traveling the seas to discover, and them discovering this land and making it better than it was before we got here. Do you think natives would have came up with cars and would we live to be 80 some years old? I don't know. I don't think so.
All right, yeah. Here it is. How is this not the same thing, just rephrased a little bit? This is what I mean. The right, a lot of these people on the right, these push these ideas, but they just rephrase them a little bit softer. And then, of course, we have this clown, who is a complete Republican shill. I'm sick of these people trying to go like, oh, he's left. Shut up. I don't want to hear it. I'm not going to believe a dude who capes for Republicans every fucking chance he gets. Immediately, what does Tim talk about? Does he talk about issues with white supremacy in the country? Certain solutions we have to get to? No. He doesn't do that. He immediately goes, he was a lefty. Look. He was authoritarian left. He wasn't right wing. He immediately capes for Republicans the second this comes out, and then uses it, of course, to push his Civil War narrative. And of course, in his whole video, and you can go watch it. You should go watch it and see for yourself. He doesn't say the word white supremacy one time. Not surprised. He instead uses it to go, look, it was the left, and let me push my Civil War narrative while I'm in there. And then in his video, he, of course, what does he do? He also does the other thing. Pivot, Waukesha. He immediately goes there, saying that was a black supremacist attack. I'm sorry, where's the official motive on his attack? That was all speculation pushed by the right. Which, that kind of narrative did embolden this guy to do these type of things. Because the right is feeding this narrative that there is some kind of attack on white people. What was the other pivot he did in this video? Immediately, gang shootings, and then counting them as mass shootings when a lot of them are shootouts, not mass shootings. Those are different. But a shooting, I think that's 2 or 3 or more people, counts as a mass shooting. And going, why isn't anyone talking about this? Motherfucker, you're not talking about it. I don't see you covering it. So what the fuck are you bringing that up for? Again, immediate deflection. Now, one of the most insane parts was, as soon as it happened, the bodies weren't even cold. Who do you think were the first people to come out and try and shift the conversation somewhere else? Who do you think it was? And this is heartbreaking. It wasn't even the white conservatives. They pulled out their black conservatives. They got all the fucking conservatives out here, the black faces, to come out and try and deflect to other things. Immediately, we have Candace coming out here. Right after this happened, immediately pivots to Waukesha, saying a black supremacist took a vehicle and plowed into a group of white people at a Christmas parade in Waukesha. Was it a racially motivated crime? Do we have the confirmation of that? No, they found some posts on his Instagram that he didn't like white people. But that doesn't mean that was the motive. But they immediately jumped to that's the motive. Now, when we have a white supremacist who is clearly in his right mind saying, this is the reason why I'm doing this, you got a lot of these conservatives pivoting immediately to something else. They tried it with Frank James too. The subway shooter in New York. They were trying, remember when they took all of Frank James' videos out of context, saying that he was a black supremacist by cutting up one video of him saying he didn't like interracial marriages? Leaving out videos where Frank James literally defended slavery and said black people should serve white people. Frank James was actually a white supremacist. He was a black white supremacist. But see, when you chop these up and then go, this is what happens, as some people have said, like Matt Walsh has said, this is what happens when you normalize anti-white racism, even though Frank James was a white supremacist. Then, like I said, this kid sees these, gets emboldened by this, thinking there's some kind of attack on white people, and this happens. Anyway, going on to what Candace said, then he says, a white supremacist carved the name of one of those white parade victims into a rifle and live streamed the mass shooting in a majority black neighborhood. Counted. And that's why I said these false narratives are emboldening these white supremacists. Because again, you're pushing the false narrative. You don't know it was a black supremacist attack. You have no evidence of that. You have no police report or motive of that, but that's what you were pushing. Now this kid acted on it. Because part of the reason he did this was retaliation for that. And of course, because she continues on, both acts are heinous, but they will not earn equal coverage in the media. Our dishonest, race-obsessed media, ironic because Kundis makes everything about race all the time, should be blamed for both of these massacres. The media should be blamed for the massacres. Okay. But a lot of the narratives, okay, let's say I agree with that. A lot of the narratives he was doing this based upon are pushed by which side? He wrote on his gun, here's your reparations. Who is the group, who is the party that is anti-reparations because they say it's an attack on white people, even though it's not? Who pushes that narrative? Okay, anyway, going on. They will elevate the Buffalo shooting because white crimes versus black victims is preferred? Bro, how long was Frank James in the media and Waukesha in the media? It went forever. They're not counting it because it's not the race-baiting narrative they want. It's not the black supremacy narrative that they want. So now they're going to say, oh, the media doesn't care. No, the media covered it plenty. Frank James was in the media for a long time. Who else immediately comes out? Vernon Jones. Immediately, here's a deflection. He did the deflection tactic. Want to talk about hate crimes and domestic terrorism? Don't stop with Buffalo. Include Chicago. Since Friday, 5 people killed, including teenagers. Waiting for Sunday's numbers. Oh, by the way, murders didn't involve a white shooter. Do those murders count? Does Vernon Jones consistently advocate for fixing Chicago? And a lot of these, like I guess said, not mass shootings, they're shootouts, but they qualify because the wording is garbage. I hate the right. This is the right standing on black bodies to use as a shield. Whenever there is one of these white supremacist attacks, what happens? What about black on black crime? Okay, why aren't you doing anything about it? Why is it that Chicago and LA and New York are only brought up when stuff like this happens? Very interesting. I don't hear the right consistently talking about Chicago or gangs or even what black on black crime means because they don't even want to get into that talk. Because imagine this, a white supremacist kills a bunch of black people and he shot 2 white people too in a racially motivated hate crime, and all these people immediately shift. These conservatives shift to what about black people? Amazing. As far as I'm concerned, this is defending white supremacy. And of course, we got Larry Elder, the black face of white supremacy, although I think he's kind of past that. And I think Candace right now is the black face of white supremacy. But here he goes. He goes back. Oh, look at Waukesha. A black man drives through Waukesha Christmas parade, kills 6, injures 62. Facebook post praised Hitler and supported BLM and called for violence against white. Did you see the where he praised? He said Hitler knew who the real Jews were. That wasn't praising Hitler. That would imply he's a black Hebrew Israelite. That's different. Then he goes on, white man in Buffalo supermarket shoots and kills 10, injures 3, posted racist manifesto. Going on, black conservative perspective. What did he do? Deflect to Chicago also. But the thing was about this. These are who were coming out first on the right to do this. Because a lot of these racists on the right, the white racists on the right, they're smart. They know what they're doing. They know we can't do this because it'll look bad. Get our black faces on the phone. Get them up there to start jumping through the hoops. Because as soon as it's Black Death, what happens? It's minimize, deflect. This is why I keep saying, I don't know why so many people on the right will just keep denying and saying they're colorblind and that there's no problem with white supremacy on their side. Anytime it's pointed out, hey, this guy was repeating talking points that come from your side. What will they do? What about black on black crime? What about the left? What about them? I already know they're bad. So then, again, this is why I say your rhetoric, Republicans, influenced this guy. Okay? Stop trying to deny it's not the case. Because he wrote the name of one of the Waukesha victims on his gun. And again, who pushed the narrative that it was a blatant white or black supremacist attack? It wasn't the left. They didn't do that. Who pushed that with no evidence? I'm sick and tired of this in the media, where it's just constantly dismiss racism. You push this, you keep pushing this narrative on the right that white people are under attack, right? You've pushed, multiple people on the right have pushed the great replacement theory. Tucker Carlson literally did. I don't know why they're trying to deny that. We have the fucking video. That's not, but the right's here trying to deflect it to. He didn't like Fox News. That's not what anybody said. They said he's repeating something that other people on that network said. That doesn't mean he likes the network. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of this coverage of how it's all, as soon as it's a white person committing a hate crime against black people, all of a sudden, just notice the tone shift, right? The quick tone shift into just minimizing and dismissing it, calling him, like I said, calling him a teenager. When did a black 18-year-old kill somebody, and then in the news it said black teenager? Trying to say, oh, he was just a crazy person. No, he wasn't crazy. I read his manifesto. He wasn't crazy. He knew exactly what he was doing. He had a plan, and he's trying to execute the plan, and he did partially execute his plan. Because this is what happens when you push a false white victimhood narrative that they're under attack by other people, when that's not the case. Stuff like this is going to happen.